My childhood.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to Ruin My Childhood, the podcast where we decide if some things are better off left in the past. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kat.
Today we're going to be doing a Macaulay Culkin movie, Richie Rich. After watching Pete and Pete, I definitely wanted to watch a Macaulay Culkin movie. I really wanted to watch Home Alone, but we already know that one's going to stand up and hold up to the test of time. So I decided to do a different Macaulay Culkin movie. Did you ever see Richie Rich?
I have not seen Richie Rich. I'm pretty excited because I was a pretty big fan of the Richie Rich comics growing up. I still have a bunch of them, I think, actually, under the bed.
So this was, I do remember seeing this movie in theaters. This was not a movie that I actually owned on VHS, so it's not one that I watched over and over again. But I definitely remember liking it. There are things that I remember, but I couldn't say that I remember the plot. Like, I just remember certain, like, set pieces. Like, I remember he has, like, this giant thing that you sit on, and he called it the Kiddlepult, and it basically launched children into, like, this giant airbag or into a swimming pool or something like that. I remember, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think the grandfather from Gilmore Girls, Edward Herman, I think is Richie Rich's father. But I'm not 100% sure on that. And the only thing I can really remember about the plot is he's so rich and he has no friends and he wants to be a normal kid, and he's not able to do that because he's so rich. So one day he's like driving around with his like butler, and he sees a bunch of like kids playing in like just some inner city park, and he offers them like a bunch of money to let him play. Like if he hits a home run, then they have to come hang out with him at his house.
Oh, that's so twisted.
Or something like that. Like they bet him $5 that he couldn't hit, and he's like, "Well, I'll give you guys like 10,000 or something." I don't know what the numbers are. If I hit a home run, and if I win, you guys have to like come hang out with me. And he hits the home run or whatever. A lot of them are like, yeah, you're the best. Let's go hang out with the rich kid. And like this one character who I think is like the pseudo love interest, even though they're children, is kind of like, I don't have money and I don't like people rubbing it in my face kind of thing. And then there's some sort of like hijinks. I'm sure there's like an uncle or a business guy trying to steal their money. I think there's also like a Mount Rushmore kind of thing with like Richie Rich and his parents, but that's it. I don't remember the actual plot of the movie.
There definitely was a Mount Rushmore type mountain in the comic books. I think that was like actually a cover of a comic at one point, but in the comics, Richie did have friends. I'm pretty sure he went to school with regular kids, and I think there was a ginger involved.
The only Richie Rich comic book I ever read was one where like his uncle, I think it was his uncle, was moving to like the ghetto or like the city. Richie Rich is like, no, you can't live there, like that's not safe. And he follows his uncle all around the city, and his uncle keeps almost getting bugged and almost getting killed, and like keeps having to like stop it. And the uncle's like, I thought it was gonna be bad, but it's really safe, so I'm gonna stay here. And Richie's like, oh no. But That's the only Richie story I remember.
So it basically paints inner cities as terrible place. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember a lot of plot lines from the comics. It was more of just a display of the disgusting excess of his lifestyle. But one thing that always bothered me about the comics was that his house was never the same from one comic to the next, and he always had like different ridiculous toys that, you know, like when people actually have a ton of money in real life, kids don't have ridiculous toys and really live like kids. Kids kind of just live like mini adults.
Yeah, what you said about the comic books, I think that kind of makes sense, because I'm not an Archie comics fan. I never really read Archie, but from the little bit that I've understood, like it's almost like The Simpsons, where the city is never quite explained where it actually is. Like it can be whatever's convenient to the plot. So
exactly. Like they have the beach, they have the mountains, it snows there every winter. Yeah, I mean, I guess like New York would be the best explanation. There actually is a Riverdale in New York.
So other than that, like I think we should just watch it. I definitely remember liking this movie, but it was not one that we owned, so it's not one that we watched over and over and over again. So I don't quite have the nostalgia, just kind of warm, fuzzy feeling like I did with some of the other movies that we've done so far.
I think my cynical child self saw an advertisement for it one time and was like, ugh, they're probably not true to the comics at all, because I was such a snob, and I never watched it. I also don't remember it being a Macaulay Culkin movie. I think I thought it was that kid from Dennis the Menace.
Oh, yeah, I don't know who that kid is. I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a very, very big Macaulay Culkin fan as a kid. Like, I saw a lot of me in him when I was a kid. Like, I kind of looked up to him.
Just like Michael Jackson.
So I really... I loved Home Alone. That was one of my favorite movies growing up. I really liked The Pagemaster. I even liked, what is it, My Girl? Or is
that was a good movie, okay?
Yeah. I loved that movie just because he was in it, and I remember I really, really, really wanted to see The Good Son. At Blockbuster, every time we'd walk by, I'd see it. And I'm like, Mom, I want to see it because it had Macaulay Culkin and it had Kevin McAllister. I really
didn't
wanted to
watch that
it.
movie until last year, and it totally justified my feeling that Elijah Wood is creepy as hell.
No, Elijah Wood was the good kid in that.
Still a creepy movie.
You're wrong. But anyway, as a child, I loved everything that Macaulay Culkin did. And I remember loving this movie, even though I don't really remember the movie. So I'm excited to watch it. I think it's going to be fun. Like I said, I remember the catapult. I remember just a few of the wacky things in it. But I think it'll be fun. I hope it holds up. Like, I think it'll just be a classic 90s movie.
All right, let's watch it.
Warner Brothers presents an adventure so big, even the richest kid in the world can't afford to miss it.
Yes!
Macaulay Culkin,
I used to think you were just some spoiled rich kid. But now, you're not so bad.
Richie Rich.
Round one to you, sir.
We just watched the Richie Rich movie with Macaulay Culkin. You said you'd never seen it before. What did you think?
I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was going to be like a made-for-TV kids movie, but it was actually a delightful family film.
It was. Like, it wasn't a good movie by any stretch of the imagination. And earlier I said it wasn't one of the movies that I owned and watched all the time, but I remember liking it. And I can see why I liked it. I don't think this is something that I would watch again. I don't think it necessarily is something that I would buy so my kids can watch in the future someday. But I enjoyed it. It was fun. I can see why I liked it.
Yeah.
It was weird, though. It was definitely a weird movie. And it was in that weird period between young, cute Macaulay Culkin and him going off the deep end. Like, he definitely shot up in terms of like height between Home Alone 2 and this movie, which were only like 2 years apart.
They were still trying to pass him off as the cute little kid and having cute little kid moments, but he was a little bit too old for it.
Yeah, like the part where he's making faces behind the magnifying glass and stuff like that. And then he does his little like breaking the fourth wall, little moments where he smiles directly at camera. It didn't quite work. He was still charming. Like, he was a really good actor and had a lot of charisma. So overall, it still worked. But yeah, there were a few moments that were a little unsettling.
Definitely weird.
But overall, it was fun. Like, basically, in a nutshell, the plot is he is the richest kid in the world, and he's very successful, and everybody loves him. He's famous, and he is actually helping his dad with the business, where his dad's unable to go to like a ribbon cutting ceremony for a factory. So, like, he shows up and delivers a speech, and everyone's like, oh, look at him, he's the best. He sees some kids playing baseball, and he realizes that even though he's the richest kid in the world, he doesn't have everything. He doesn't have friends or anything like that. And what was pretty interesting is some of the adult characters kind of noticed too, but they tried to keep him away from the regular people. And then the movie does a pretty good job of like showing us what his like day-to-day life is. Like, they go to his weird school where they all have like giant desks and fax machines.
His school is pretty hilarious.
And like all the people that he associates with every day, even the ones who are like not bad guys, who are like really douchey, like, were not great people, and they weren't fun, and they just weren't kids. Like, I do think there was a pretty good balance of explaining that, yes, he has expectations as, you know, a billionaire, but he still wants to have fun.
Yeah. There were definitely things that I really enjoyed that I wasn't expecting. Like the fact that a lot of the stuff that the villain is proposing, because he's a business partner of the dad, a lot of the stuff he was actually proposing, all these shady business deals, are things that have actually happened pretty regularly in present day big business. Like, back then, they were things that, you know, a couple of companies had done or people proposed, but nothing that anyone was actually enough of a jerk to do. And now this is stuff that totally happens now. And it, like, the whole movie, half the time it's like an ode to consumerism, and half the time it is bashing Wall Street. Despite being timely in that way, it also falls into some really, I don't know, I guess like sexist tropes and fat shaming tropes that definitely are not in film these days, which is good. When Richie's making a speech towards the beginning of the movie, he's saying that he loves socket wrenches, his dad loves socket wrenches, and if his mom knew what socket wrenches were, she would love them too.
That's right.
Yeah, so that was pretty sexist. And then that actor who, I think he was also in Tom and Huck,
The professor?
Yeah, they just completely fat shame him the entire movie.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, every time he shows up, he's eating something.
Yeah, or trying to eat something.
And then he's not brave at all. Like, he's like, I'm never going to tell you anything. And then, like, the bad guy threatens him, like, I'll tell you everything. Like, he had no spine.
Yeah.
And, like, he was ultimately a good guy, but, yeah, he, real redeeming qualities.
So those are things I definitely don't miss about 90s movies.
There was some interesting stuff. I thought, like, there was a lot of stuff I thought was really dumb. Like, I hated the fact that the dog had dollar signs on him, and they called him a dollarmation. To actually touch on your point a little bit more of the sexism and everything like that, the father, played by Edward Herman, Richard, was definitely, out of touch with the reality a little bit. Spends a lot of money on things that other people think aren't worthwhile, but it's all for the good of mankind, at least in his opinion. Like, he has a weird smelling device that ends up saving them because it smells the TNT. And then he's very charitable, and he's building all these factories and everything, giving them to the workers. But everyone sees him as just spending too much money. But when the mom does it, everyone makes fun of her, including him. So she wants a portrait, so they build the Mount Richmore, and she makes a big deal about wanting it to be done in a week. So they have people invent basically lasers to carve out Mount Rushmore in a week. Except with their faces. So it was pretty interesting how anytime that she did anything, everyone's kind of like, that's crazy, what are you doing? So I do agree with that trope that you talked about earlier.
Like, she basically funded this amazing new technology, and she gets no love.
Yeah. I mean, it is ridiculous that that's the reason that this technology was invented, but it did work out, and they had the resources to do it, and there was no reason to have a smell-o-vision or whatever it was. Like, that's not very useful. It ended up helping them out. But
well, no.
really...
I mean, like, in day-to-day life, I can think of one situation. Is that chocolate or poop? Yeah. That could be valuable, Michael.
Oh, man.
You don't have to do the dirty work when you have a smell-o-vision gun.
Yeah, I guess so. But everybody thought that was, like, the one weird idea. And it was really interesting that in this world, the world was basically the same as regular 1994 America, except for in Richie Rich's house. So in the house, they have the laboratory where the scientist works. And he's inventing bulletproof sprays, multi-million-dollar robotic bees. He's inventing a machine that you can put garbage in it, and it's supposed to be able to make anything, but it's stuck making bowling balls until the very end. Like, it's crazy the amount of stuff that this guy has in his home.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, though.
The butler guy was cool. Like, he's one of those actors where you see him, you're like, oh, it's that guy. Like, he was the dad in Jumanji and also the hunter in Jumanji. I thought he was great as the uptight butler.
Yeah, he's had a good, solid career. You see him in a lot of stuff, but I wouldn't recognize him in the grocery store.
Probably not. Then there was just a bunch of, like, other little, like, Richie's out of touch with reality. Like, they want to bet $10, and he's like, 10? 10,000? Okay, seems steep, and then pulls out like a lot of cash. But there was a really fun montage. I think the part that I identified with as a kid that I really liked was when the butler Cadbury, he offered the kids $100 to come play with Richie at the house, and he had like a roller coaster. Which, first off, how did they not notice the roller coaster when they got there? Like, when they get on the roller coaster, they're like, you have a roller coaster? Like, you would see that, and you never see the roller coaster anywhere else in the movie other than when they're on it.
Right.
And then then they're like, you want to play tag?
And it's just the
like,
one roller coaster.
Yeah. And then he's like, you want to play tag? And they're like, tag? That's lame. And then it's ATVs. And then the Kiddapult. The Kiddapult was great. I wanted a Kiddapult when I was a kid.
They did a pretty good job of thinking up legit kid stuff that a rich kid would actually like. I do think there was a missed opportunity here to illustrate what a total and complete douche rich kids are.
They tried to do that a bit in the school when they were doing the fencing and stuff like that, and he invited them over to hang out, and one's like, oh, I'm going to go with my dad to do a hostile takeover, and the other one's like, I'm going to go do this thing, and it was like something like super snobby. So I guess they did kind of touch on it.
A little. There is like another typical trope that they didn't include in this movie, which is the father was successful, super successful, but he wasn't absent. He was still like really involved in his kid's life, and Richie was his parents' number one priority.
They had a whole cellular network before cell phones were big, specifically for those two.
And then, of course, like what their vault was filled with was all sentimental stuff. And so they were actually good people, and they used their money for philanthropy, even though they did paint the mother as being kind of frivolous and flighty. But, you know, they kind of painted just women in general that way.
Yeah, the other mom was kind of that way too, like bumbling and everything like that, and needed to be rescued by the butler guy. And she was a little bit more pushy, like she was a stronger female role, but still pretty much a caricature. You mentioned the vault, so I guess we should talk about the plot of this movie a little bit.
Yeah.
To me, it made no sense. So basically, in a nutshell, there was this guy named Van Doe, who, the actor who plays him, I can't remember his name, but he's in like all the CSI shows and stuff on CBS and ABC and NBC, like just
that guy with a big head.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who just goes from like crime scene, procedural, basically the same show over and over and over again. He plays Van Doe, and he's supposed to be like the right-hand man of the business, and he wants to take over the business. So he and the security guard are like set up this plot to kill the Riches, and so they're supposed to blow up the plane, but then Richie is sad because he has no friends, so the butler's like, why don't we keep him off? So there's a bomb, they find it, it blows up, but they survive, and they land in the ocean. And during this time, the bad guy, while they're still in the plane, goes to the main, like the CEO's office where Richard normally works, and just is sitting there, and he's like popping champagne as these guys are about to. It's like, that is the most suspicious thing you could be doing.
Right, I was thinking the same thing.
And it was crazy. And then it was very presumptuous just to assume that he would, even though he was like the right-hand guy, that he would automatically get the company.
Right, and I thought it was a little bit far-fetched how many people within the company just sort of like went along with him. Like, they didn't seem like they were all in cahoots the entire time, but for him to have taken over or tried to take over as quickly as he did, they would have all had to be in on it.
Well, it's weird how much of a bunch of pushovers this board was. So one of the other things that it's a kid's movie, so it makes sense that they did this, but also it's super unrealistic, is Richie ends up taking over the company. So his family owned 51%, which is the smart thing to do if you own a big company like that, so you can maintain control. He maintains that the family was still alive, which they were, but he goes and takes a sabbatical from work, but he has to be coached through his speech, which that kind of bugged me because the entire movie, Richie was always very articulate, and in this particular case, Cadbury had to tell him the word sabbatical because he was taking a sabbatical from school so he can run the company. So he goes in and he's like, well, I'm going to run the company. Everyone's like, you're a child. And he goes, well, I've got 51% and I'm going to run it. Well, that still wouldn't work out. Like, that's not legal. But they let him do it, and they're like, well, we're still not going to build the factory or whatever because that costs this amount of money, so we're going to have to cut 500,000 jobs or something ridiculous. It was like a ridiculous amount of jobs. It's like, but earlier in the movie, they said this company is still doing record gains. So like, why would they have to cut that much labor? That didn't make sense. But then he convinces the board that they should all take pay cuts to pay for whatever it is that they're going to do.
Right.
And then throughout, there's just like this montage of him working and having fun with his friends at work. And he makes a candy division, and then he does this, and he does this, and he does this, and he does this. And Richie is now the most successful like CEO ever, like more successful than his father is.
Sexiest man alive.
Yeah, like record gain. So first off, like, how long was his father missing?
Right. They don't make it very clear on the timeline, and then you kind of flash back to the parents, and they could not have survived on that boat for long enough for Richie to have done all these things.
Exactly. And then long enough for Van Doe to go, oh man, this kid's doing too well, I'm not going to get the company. I'm going to frame Cadbury for the murder. Then he went to the judge and got custody of Richie. And the whole plot was not just the company, but to also get the family vault, which is on their private property. Like, why would them dying automatically mean he gets the house and the vault?
Right.
That made no sense. So like the plot didn't really make a ton of sense. It's a kid's movie, but there are a lot of holes in that.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have anything else that you want to kind of talk about? Because I do want to talk about the end, but
I guess like in comparing the film to the comic books were really just sort of like a loose suggestion of the characters, because I know like Gloria, the redhead girl, and what was it, like Freckles was another character from the comic books, and there was another kid. Freckles and him were like always together.
Was it Pee-wee?
Yes, Pee-wee. They didn't know Richie at the beginning of this, and in the comic books, I remember them just kind of being kids in the neighborhood, and Van Doe was also a neighbor, I think, and he just happened to be super rich as well. So in Richie's comic book world, there were, like, the rich kids, like, that he went to school with, and the Van Does were big characters. But I don't remember there ever being a point where he didn't have any friends.
Yeah, I guess you need to have that to make a movie, though. But I never really read the Archie comics or any of the Richie Rich or
Well,
Sabrina
Richie
the
Rich
Teenage
comics
Witch or any of
were,
those.
they were Harvey comics.
No, they weren't. I thought they interacted with each other.
I don't remember Richie Rich interacting with any of the Archie characters, but Harvey Comics was like its own separate thing.
Oh, well, I'm stupid then.
Harvey Comics was all the characters with the giant heads.
Oh, well, I apologize to our listeners for being ignorant about
ignorant.
Richie Rich. After the framing of Cadbury, Van Doe takes over the house and everything really quick. He basically makes Richie Rich a prisoner in his own home. Somehow he gets out with the help of the scientists, but they don't explain it. Like, he's on camera, and the next thing you know, he's at the police station,
Right.
busting out Cadbury with acid-based toothpaste. And that scene gets pretty dark, where they send a guy in to kill Cadbury, and they're going to make it look like he hung himself. And Cadbury puts up a fight, somehow survives. Like, we don't know, like, it's all off screen. Like, you see him get thrown into frame every once in a while, and then it shows him, like, clapping his hands, like, yeah, I did
Like
a
he
good
must
job.
know Kung Fu or something.
Right? But then later on, when they're back at the house and they're like breaking into the house because the parents are there, they use the catapult to fling like manure at some of the guards that work for Van Doe. And then Richie and his parents are up on the mountain. They're like dangling around on scaffolding, trying to run away from Van Doe. Cadbury goes up to another guard and he punches him. He's like, that's not so hard. Like, he's never done it before, but he's like hurting his hand. And then he straight tries to murder Van Doe. Like, he aims the laser right at Van Doe and it shoots. And Van Doe like flies off the mountain and somehow magically gets tangled in rope, even though he was flung like 50 feet from the wall because they can't kill him. But the intention was to murder him.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, I guess it wouldn't. I know it would be murder, I guess, because he was saving his.
Yeah, it wasn't like self-defense.
Yeah,
technically.
And then they made a Michael Jackson joke right in front of Macaulay Culkin. I thought that was in bad taste.
Right.
They used the laser to
Michael
blast off the
Jackson
mom's
joke.
nose.
That was pretty horrifying and kind of hilarious when it happened. Also, why were the police so thoroughly incompetent? Like, where were they in this entire thing?
There's no
All
police
this stuff
anywhere.
is going down, like, this mountain is getting blown up. I mean, they have a pretty big plot of land, one would assume, but they have neighbors, sort of. Why are the cops not paying attention?
Why was there no investigation into whether or not the Riches were still alive?
Exactly. Basically, for them to be declared dead, I think they would have to have been missing for a certain amount of time, and there would have to be a certain amount of evidence that they were most likely dead.
Yeah.
So the movie is just a whole bunch of plot holes, but it was very entertaining.
Yeah, the guy who directed this movie did a bunch of things that are not good, but very, like, they're remembered fondly, like How to Lose a Guy in, like, 10 Days and stuff like that. Like,
How to Lose a Guy in like 10 days?
yeah, that's what it is. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Alternate title. California edition.
Yeah.
Like, totally.
I know he did How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. So that's something. He's done at least 2 movies. Do you know the other thing I thought was kind of ridiculous? So at the end of the movie, Richie realizes that his parents are up in Mount Richmore. He goes to the lab really quick to try to get some gadgets, and he goes through a bag, like just picks a random bag, and there's nothing in it but like junk. But then it has that spray with the impervious spray that they showed at the beginning of the movie where he can spray anything and it makes it like waterproof and fireproof and bulletproof.
Mm-hmm.
And he sprays himself with it, and they don't really make a big call out to it other than they just show the spray, so you'd have to remember from the beginning of the movie that it had it.
Yeah.
And then he goes up and Van Doe shoots him, like just straight shoots him, and he's like, what if he shot him in the head? He should have at least put on like a hoodie and a handkerchief to cover his face. Like, it would still bust his face open, but he'd survive. So there's a lot of little things like that. But it was a kid's movie in the 90s. A lot of, like, let's be real, 90s movies are not nearly as good as movies are today.
No.
Audiences are a little bit more sophisticated than they were back then because, you know, we're in the golden era of TV and special effects. Like, so much more is possible in movies these days. And, you know, a movie like this, like you said earlier, you thought it was going to be like a made-for-TV kind of quality movie, but it was much better than that.
It was
Like
definitely
this,
huge budget.
Yeah,
for sure.
this movie would be a made-for-TV movie today, but it had some CG, like that weird CGB, just like random things. We're like, well, we have the money to do it. Let's just put it in.
I don't know. We're not really exposed to kids' movies these days. I mean, Disney has a lot of money, and I'm sure that they are pumping out some really big budget, grade A garbage. They have to be.
I don't have anything else to say about this movie. I definitely see why I liked it. I would not say that it ruined my childhood. I definitely wouldn't watch it again, but I can definitely see why I liked it as a kid. And I think kids would still find it funny.
Yeah.
And there were some moments as an adult that were kind of funny and clever, and I was like, that's stupid. But I did chuckle, here and there.
You said that's stupid quite a bit, but I was delighted.
Your mom thought it was really funny, so we
My
actually
mom
watched
did think
this
it was hilarious.
with Katrina's mother. And she was laughing throughout. Like, it was a fun movie. Like, it was dumb, but it was fun. Like, I was going like, that's stupid. That's stupid. I was smiling as I was saying it because it's kind of clever in its own stupid way. All right, so what are we doing next week?
Next week, we are going to watch the amazing made-for-TV movie, Not Quite Human, starring Alan Thicke.
Damn it. That looks terrible.
I have very
All right.
fond memories of this movie.
I never saw it. All right, next week we're doing Not Quite Human. Okay, so where can they follow you on the social meteors?
I am all over the internet at Katrina Ossity. You can find most of my content on YouTube. Go check it out.
You can follow the podcast on Instagram and Twitter at MDXpods. We're on Facebook as well. Of course, you can check out the website, MDXpods.com. Please help us out on Patreon. We do have some new surprises up there, new rewards for people who help out. And we are now also Amazon affiliates. So if you need to purchase anything from Amazon, we will have the affiliate link in the description for this. You're going to be shopping at Amazon anyway, so you might as well help us fund this podcast. It's the same price.
Sure.
It's the same website. It just gives us a little bit of portion of the profits. So help us out. Thank you for listening.
Okay, bye.
Bye.